Welcome, Linda. Glad you're here. 2 in Ontario, Canada. We've got Suzanne, 2 from Elmwood Park. We've got Christiane with 3 in Oak Park. We've got Jim from Martinez, California. Great. We'll let that keep running. Folks, please keep checking in. Let us know where you're coming in from and how many people are with you. But we'll go ahead in the interest of time and get started. So I'm Anna Garcia Doyle, the Executive Director of the One Earth Film Festival. Welcome to our virtual screening and discussion, which we hope will present rich opportunities for learning and provide a brave and safe space for important conversations that matter deeply right now in our country and across the globe. One Earth's 10th season theme is inspiring change, and watching Public Trust absolutely inspired and fired me up. After the film, we hear from Angelo Baca, who is himself a Navajo and Hopi filmmaker, whose story about working to protect Bears Ears Monument really drew me in. While watching, think about some questions you might ask Angelo, as well as our other incredible panelists who have knowledge and wisdom about the topics that will be presented tonight. I don't want to go any further without acknowledging our sponsors and partners, without whom we could not do this work. So thank you to Merrill, a Bank of America company, Riley Ungleb Burke, also the Environmental Law and Policy Center, Euclid Avenue United Methodist Church, and the Broderick family. We really appreciate your support. And if your circumstances allow, please donate to support One Earth's nonprofit year-round screening events, youth programs, and more. You can do that at oneearthfilmfest.org, and we would appreciate your support.
We are thrilled you're with us as One Earth Film Fest celebrates 10 years of inspiring change and utilizes the power of film to spark change on topics of environment and those intersected with environment, like social justice. The fest has had to adapt to a virtual format, but we strive to stay true to our model. While we're not physically together, we are here together, live, virtually, still able to create community, become aware of issues, engage in dialogue, and be inspired to act. African-American activist Angela Davis said, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world." The stories in our fest films reflect that possibility. Our collective actions will achieve that possibility. Our event will take place in 4 parts. We'll introduce you to some folks who will help us have a great discussion after the film. We'll then watch it together. Then afterwards, we'll unpack the film's themes in a facilitated Q&A with our wonderful panelists. Please participate by using the chat to share thoughts, ideas, or questions. We'll end by sharing concrete actions you can take to be part of the solution. These actions come from our panelists and other action partners. As we live current movements and reframe narratives around justice, environment, and bringing innovative, equitable solutions to our climate crisis, we're hopeful for the future. I am grateful to the knowledgeable filmmakers, film subjects, facilitators, and panelists joining this and other fest events. They'll guide discussions to help spark and sustain actions for the protection of our One Earth and for the just treatment of its resources and its people. We've found that shared agreements help keep our conversations safe and respectful. Please observe these agreements when participating. Put aside your preconceptions, acknowledge your privilege, internalize what you've learned, approach the conversation with respect. Engage your active listening, use I statements and get comfortable with your own story. Acknowledge Native peoples who came before us in protecting our land. One last thing before we meet our facilitator and program participants. If you're active on social media, tell people this is happening. Amplify these voices and be part of the community we're building here together. The hashtag for the festival is hashtag OEFF2021. Thanks again to all of you for being here. And now I'd like to turn it over to our facilitator to introduce themselves, the panelists, and our film.
Beautiful. My name is Toni Anderson. I'm from Navajo. I'm the founder and executive director of right now. It is an organization dedicated to environmental awareness for our young people to reconnect them to climate and culture. I strongly believe in the One Earth Film Festival model. I use it to leverage awareness across Chicago on how we can all be better stewards of the beautiful blue earth that we all live on. I'm excited to, I think this is my 7th year doing the One Earth Film Festival. I invite you all to hang around with us after the film is over. Oftentimes, I am a big nerd. I love these sorts of films, and I love having discussions about these sorts of films after they're over. But oftentimes, the movie's over and everybody just goes back to their cars and goes home. The good thing about the One Earth Film Festival is that we invite you to have a discussion, stick around with us, and 3 of the people that I'm very, very excited to introduce that will be a part of our discussion is Angelo Baca he's a Navajo and Hopi filmmaker and activist and appears in tonight's film, Public Trust. Danielle Russell, school garden coordinator for Openlands and writer of an article that you must read called Land, Race, Justice, and Booker Vance, policy outreach coordinator for Elevate Energy here from Chicago as well. So I'm very excited to introduce our panelists and invite you to join us after the film to hear what they have to say. And we're just wave to our panelists. Hey, panelists, really excited. So we invite you to hang out for our beautiful film, The Public Trust, our fight for land sovereignty. Enjoy this beautiful film. It is a very powerful film. So I'm looking forward to inviting you back, and let's all have a discussion about this after it's over. Enjoy. Okay, beautiful. Hello, everybody. What a powerful, powerful, powerful film. Amazing, amazing. I have no words. It's such a powerful film. My name is Toni Anderson. I'm here in Chicago. I invite you to put significant scenes and people and lines from the film that you remember. It certainly is in keeping with 10th anniversary of the idea here, this year's theme being inspiring change. And definitely, this movie does inspire change in all of us. And I invite you to put your comments there. I see Susan. We may be in better position now, but history can repeat itself. Don't let your guard down. Absolutely, Melissa says. So we're all in agreement, right? Start bullying our reps in Congress about these things. Lisa Willis says, audio is spotty. I would emphasize that this public land dilemma isn't limited to Western states. The same drama is playing out along the East Coast and Gulf states, and it's shameful. Thank you for that comment. Michelle says, why aren't companies held accountable for cleaning up the damage that they do to land, and why are taxpayers paying instead? Very, very good point, Michelle. I love hearing of American perspectives. It's extremely powerful and important that they are uplifted in the environmentalist movement because this is still their land. Thank you for that comment, Shalyn Malfio. So lots and lots and lots of different scenes and people and ideas from this movie clearly have inspired us and inspired us to want to change. I want to switch over to our panelists and make sure that you meet our beautiful panelists that are going to join us for a discussion. And again, we invite you all to stick around and talk to us because we'd love to hear your thoughts about this film. So let's get to our panelists. Angelo Baca, who is a Navajo and Hopi filmmaker and activist, who I'm sure you all saw appear in this film. Angelo is a cultural activist, scholar, filmmaker, and doctoral student in anthropology at New York University. He is the cultural resources coordinator at Utah Dene Baca, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the defense and protection of culturally significant ancestral lands. The National Parks Conservation Association recently designated him as one of 10 under 40 dynamic cultural activists who make up the association's Next Generation Advisory Council. He has published a widely read op-ed in the New York Times. Shashja Bears Ears is Angelo Baca's latest award-winning film about the 5 tribes of the Bears Ears, intertribal coalition that work together to protect 1.9 million acres of Utah wilderness through a national monument designation. Welcome, Angelo. We welcome you and your powerful presence to this panel and your powerful presence in the film. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing more from you. We also have Danielle Russell, School Garden Coordinator for Openlands and writer of article Land, Race, Equity, and Justice. Danielle Russell is the school coordinator for, hold on, I'm sorry. Danielle Russell is the school garden coordinator at Openlands and works with school communities to design green schoolyards and activate school gardens. Danielle knows that when children connect to nature and gardening, it helps with their well-being, and that ensuring access to nature and environmental wellness are issues of race, gender, and class-based justice. Danielle was a program coordinator for DePaul University's Community Peacemakers program, organizing college students to facilitate social justice conversations and projects with high school students. Danielle holds a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from DePaul University. Welcome, Danielle. We're really excited to have you here on our panel as well. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, we have Pastor Booker Vance, Policy Outreach Coordinator, Elevate Energy, ordained Luther pastor in the ELCA for over 25 years, community organizer and environmental justice advocate, lobbyist for environmental and justice initiatives and legislation, and is proud of FEJA and pending CEJA legislation. Welcome, Pastor Vance. Thank you for joining us this evening. Well, I want to get right into the panel discussion. We have lots of questions coming in. We invite questions from you all. If you have questions for our panelists, please go ahead and put those in the chat. We'll get to them as soon as possible. In the meantime, I'd like to just go ahead and dive right in with our facilitators. There is so much in this film that stirred me and inspired me. Really moved my heart, struck nerves. One of the things that really stood out for me in this, and I hope that you all can hear me. Can you hear me? Can I get a thumbs up? Wonderful. One of the things that really struck me is this idea of what land means to people. One of the things that I saw was one of the comments was land is identity. And one of the things that I saw you write, Danielle, in your article, that land itself is power. It's material, spiritual wealth, and stability. And I just think about what land means to all of us and the stories that we all carry when we think about land. And land not just being a commodity for all of us, but land being a sacred story for each of our identities. So I'd just like to open up by inviting the panel to kind of just tell us about their identity and with land, and the journey that you took to have the relationship and the advocacy that you have with land right now. And let's start with Angelo. I would love to hear from you.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, good. I like the visual cues. That way I know I'm not talking to myself. Yat Angelo Baca Yinisha Bashchit Nishlink he's Ani Bashish Chin Torechitni Dashiche Nakaidene Dashanella. That's our traditional introduction for ourselves. I say who I am and where I'm from and my clans. So they're my kinship connections, my family relations. And that connects us to places and peoples and communities and immediately establishes our connection to our landscape and to a history of ancestors before us. So I'm Navajo and Hopi, and on both sides of my family, we have connections to Bears Ears. And this has been something that's a personal as well as a professional project because I'm finishing out my dissertation at NYU and writing about this Bears Ears experience, advocating for the landscape and for my community. And I'm in the last parts of this right now, so it's an honor and a privilege. It's also a great responsibility. So I'm just happy that I'm able to contribute to this conversation right now. So thanks for having me. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Angelo. I felt your spirit during the film, and one of the things that really struck me was the idea that 85% of Bears Ears is under threat, and so that's an incredible statistic for me, and maybe you can fill us a little bit in on where that might be now.
Yeah, the original proposal by the tribes was a 1.9 million acre proposal, and Obama's designation was 1.35 million. So there was an amount there that wasn't included in that designation. So Trump, being Trump, likes to outdo Obama in everything. So he tried to reduce that by almost a million acres. So what was left was 220,000 acres that were split up, a northern unit and a southern unit. And so the really racist and anti-Indian history of Trump and a lot of the conservative folks that were affiliated with this party were really happy about this because it actually made manifest in this current time that existing racial tension that has been boiling there for decades. And so the Trump administration was not exactly a great time for us. It was very difficult, hard time to get through with all of our community members and our elders. But I think that we are more steadfast in our resolve, and we feel hopeful now that there is a possibility for actual substantive change during this administration.
Thank you, Angelo. We are with you and hoping as well that the new administration will be a better ally for what is going on in Bears Ears. And thank you for your. I'd like to switch over to Danielle because I'm really interested in your connections, not only your article, your brilliant article, but about land and equity, but really, why is it so important that we think about these things when we are working with youth in community garden spaces? Why is it important for our youth to really understand land sovereignty? Oh, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Nope, we can't hear you, honey. Okay, well, while we're figuring out your audio, I'm going to switch it over to Pastor Vance, because Pastor Vance, I have lots of curiosities about your take on why the spiritual, like, Danielle wrote that land is material spiritual wealth, and I know that you are a spiritual being, and I would like to know how your faith enters your care for the land.
Well, as you know, as people of African descent, we have found ourselves, as well as our Native American brothers and sisters, often hoodwinked about land and possession and stability that we have always sought here in these United States. And so this continued assault on people of color continues to just really, as many of you saw the film, it just continues to throw us off, and so we do have to organize. We have to have sustained organizing. We have to continue to mobilize. We have to continue to present ourselves, even though we the people didn't include us. We the people, and if this land is our land, and we have to claim it. But it's very clear that the spiritual dynamic, because that's where we're grounded, in land and in earth and in the spirit. But the piece that got raised earlier about learning history, the history is so distorted that we have to really write our own narrative and rewrite the narrative so that we can teach our children how important, like you said, gardening and land is, because the narrative doesn't include us in any kind of solid piece. And so I'm real convinced that if we don't use our spiritual forces to help bind us to build the strength in order to sustain ourselves, then sustain an organized front, then we'll continue to find ourselves being challenged. I think that to see this movie was so kind of telling, in the sense we saw stuff go full circle, that went from successes and winning to finding ourselves now back at the square one again. But I'm clear that we can't be nice, we can't be polite, we can't be apologetic. We have to be very focused in making sure that the land is gotten back for our brothers and sisters, and we have to unify ourselves to support in that effort.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think that Danielle is back up, I hope. Can we hear you? Not yet. Okay. Oh, well, hopefully we'll figure you out. In the meantime, we have a question from Michelle from our audience who asks, why aren't companies held accountable for cleaning up the damage they do to the land, and why are taxpayers paying instead? I invite anyone to answer that question.
Well, this is Pastor Vance. Corporate accountability has never been one of the gifts of our democracy at this particular point. We find, as you hear the rhetoric of the Republican Party, and we even see under the Biden administration, this effort to be bipartisan and to be cooperative. And even in the latest stimulus bill that just passed the night before last, that we found after all that negotiation and even giving up things, the Republican Party didn't vote for the stimulus bill. And so the question is, how long do you try to play nice and get along instead of doing the things that we need to do in order to forge ahead? While it would be nice to have cooperation, the reality is that many corporations have never paid, whether it's Exelon or the oil companies, they've never remedied the problems and the challenges that they've impacted, whether it's Exxon Valdez or any of these other incidents that happened over the years, that they've never reparations is one kind of dynamic. Repairing the breaches and the devastation is a whole nother dynamic that corporations haven't been held accountable for.
Right on. Thank you, Pastor. And I would invite Angelo. Do you have anything you want to expand on? I see you nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that was a very large concern for the Bears Ears landscape was that it's a spiritually and culturally significant landscape. It's a living cultural landscape for all of these tribes. So what Bernadette is talking about is a very real thing. We subsist off of that. We use it for firewood, we use it for plants, medicines, for ceremony. So extractive industry, whether it's oil, gas, uranium, or what have you, has left its mark, and they have no responsibility, no accountability. There's no way for them to be made to clean up their mess. And so whenever people tell me, or they're actually trying to argue with me whether or not they think it's a good idea to have it be a federally designated national monument versus some other designation, I say the math for me is easy, because on one hand, you have people coming to visit a space. Teach them to approach it respectfully, understand this is an indigenous space, that you're a guest here, and you should leave it better than you found it. That goes standard for everybody's house. On the other hand, you have extractive industry that makes a mess, destroys the area, pollutes the land, the water, the air, and all of our other relatives who are using that land, and they don't have any responsibility. And it's easy. There is no second guessing. We want to protect that land, keep it intact, not have extractive industry or corporations or anyone else go in there, destroy it, and leave a mess. So it's best to have it the way it is, the way that our Creator intended it for. And we are the original stewards of the land, and we still are.
Thank you for that. One of the things that kind of amazes me, I saw in the film, is that we're still building infrastructure for kind of antiquated fuel systems like that are not sustainable, will not carry us 7 generations into the future. And so one of the things that really struck me is, where are we with clean energy? Why is this country not pushing harder? And maybe Pastor Vance, you can talk a little bit about what Elevate Energy's work is about and how your organization is working toward a just and equitable transition to a clean energy future.
Thank you. Well, the clean energy and the clean energy economy and the Future Energy Jobs Act that we were part of about 4 years ago continues to be a primary piece that we've been pushing, particularly in the legislature. The challenge for many of us is how do you work with utilities and corporations, because utilities and corporations have by their very nature a propensity to be, I wouldn't say corrupt, but not always being moral in their endeavors. And so this legislation continues to be something that we are challenged by as we work with other partners and other environmental justice groups to make sure that this happens. That's why we talk a little bit about, particularly in the Black community, about CEJA and beyond, clean energy and beyond, because if the clean energy economy doesn't impact our communities in a transformative way and provide jobs and resources that help build wealth and build communities, then it's really not helpful to us in the long run. And what we found even in FIJA is that many times with the jobs and with the opportunities, we got the short end of the stick, which is pretty much historical, as my brother is talking about. We do get the short end of the stick, and the question is, how do we make sure when we walk away that we've been able to build wealth, to help create careers that people can lean on, and to be able to have a productive discussion. And so we have to teach about carbonization and decarbonization and what that means for our neighborhoods and communities. What does it mean to have electrical vehicles, and what impact that has on our communities, and particularly with the clean air in relationship to that. And just really this issue of corporate responsibility, and how do we make sure that when we write legislation, that corporate accountability is a primary function that we make sure is evident in the outcomes of what we do in our legislation. The Black Caucus in Illinois has done a wonderful job of writing an agenda of 4 pillars, and they talked about a lot about those things. And I think what we find is that the model that the tribes did out west in this movie we saw of working together and coming together, we as Black and brown people and environmentalists have to come together and unify as well. If we don't work together, and if we don't come to a unity in relationship to how we deal with the forces, the corporations and so forth, then we'll also find ourselves kind of on the short end of the stick.
Thank you for that. And just to help our audience out, can you tell us what CEJA and FIJA stand for?
Sure. So the FIJA was the Future Energy Jobs Act. And what it attempted to do was to provide some opportunity for job creation and looking at environmental justice and transforming in our communities and our neighborhoods. And it was an act that was passed about 4 years ago. It worked with multicultural kind of transformation with unions. But we've had some historical problems with unions, and we still haven't quite figured it out. How do we make sure diverse groups are represented in the union workforce? And so now we've rewritten a new bill to come up after the 4-year expansion has now come into an end. And we want to make sure we improve on all the challenges and the changes that we have. And so it's called the Clean Energy Jobs Act. And that's the new green economy, as you've heard that discussion as well. But how that plays out is important. But again, the tie-in is with this movie is that it's really clear that if you don't have sustained organization and sustained collaboration, it's going to be hard pressed to make the kind of differences we need. And so we need the issue, as you know, Toni, of intersectionality, that all of this stuff is intersectional. And if we don't understand intersectionality and how what happens in Utah and what happens in Montana and what happens across the country is impacting us, many of us have been siloed in our thinking. And so we don't, when we talk about, Biden had done a couple of what you call presidential acts, and there was great uproar. But as you can see in the history, that Trump had done the same thing and basically abused many of these neighborhoods and communities and parts of our country. And there's nothing wrong with taking it back. But we have to build on that. We have to use Biden and his administration as an opportunity to organize ourselves for change and transformation.
Thank you, Pastor. I'm going to check back in with Danielle just to see if she is back with us. Yes, can we hear her? Maybe not. Okay. Well, let's get to why this land.
Wait, we should be able to pipe Danielle in.
Is she here?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay!
Yay! We had to do some finagling with the technology. Hi everyone.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you. Would you remind
Well, we
me
have
of
a
the
question. Sure. What we want to know is how does the work that you do with young people build an ethic that prepares them to understand the importance of land sovereignty and land trust? How are you working? Because I work with youth and we're teaching them all kinds of things, but how is your work affecting how they build kind of a next generation of youth that understand why our public lands are important? And what do you see and hear from young people that gives you hope for the future?
Wow. It's interesting because I haven't been able to work with young people that much with the pandemic. But a lot of the work that I do about creating a sense of belonging at the end of the day. A lot of my work is mostly with teachers and helping them to incorporate gardening and nature-based education within their curriculum. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like a sneaky way for us to be able to provide that connection to nature, to give them the sense of play and wonder and a sense of awe when they're experiencing natural spaces, whether that's going on a field trip to a natural area that they might not have been able to go to before if they didn't have the transportation to go, or they might not have known about it, or in their own schoolyard, somewhere that is always a place that they go to, or in their own yard, just trying to find those different connections to nature in a small sense. And why it's so important is because, as was mentioned before, connection to land is wealth, material, and that we can partner with it to produce what we need to survive as communities, whether it's food, textiles, our homes, everything that we need comes from the land. And so that's where that material wealth comes from, and that spiritual wealth, just being able to look at something that is just happening, these phenomenons of nature, is something that does something to our psyches and to our spirits, that connects us with something greater than ourselves. It connects us with each other, and it connects us with ourselves. And as was mentioned, these are a part of our traditions historically, and how we connect with nature as Black and Indigenous people historically is something that is definitely in line with the idea of stewardship and the idea of partnering with land instead of just extracting from it. And I think that in terms of sovereignty of land, it's definitely about not just what can the land do for me, but it's the idea of being able to go into the land, go into a little patch of soil, be like, what's up, Earth? How can we work together? Do you mind if I plant this cranberry bush over here? Oh, you needed some prairie over there based upon your historical context? Okay, cool. And I think it's about being able to partner with what we need as communities, but also what does the land need based upon the patterns that we're seeing happening. And I think being able to teach that to youth not only teaches them about the science and the processes of nature, but also the science and process of working together in community with the land.
Beautiful. Thank you, Danielle. I'm all about that. We've got to make sure that we are handing down the things that we know about this sacred land to the next generation, so that we are not creating and perpetuating more generations that are not for the planet. So I commend you for your work. Thank you. I want to turn toward the audience again, those of you who've been popping things into our chat, we're very grateful for your comments and enthusiasm. An activist by the name of Robert Swan said, "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it." And I am all about that quote. And to that point, a lot of us just don't know what to do. This is just a very overwhelming time. There's so much confusion in the political, scientific, education space. There's just all these facts and non-facts that are all just being jumbled up. It's hard to really understand when there's so much being done to undermine the truth and to suppress the truth and mangle the truth to benefit so many. It's hard to know where to get in and where to start. So I'll turn to you, to our panelists. What actions can people take to be a part of the solution? And I invite all of you to comment on that.
So I'm thankful for Danielle, particularly when she talked about clearly the George Washington Carver mentality. You have to change your crop to make sure that it's beneficial to the community. But I'm also struggling what you're raising, Toni, is that we have to change not only the flight plan, but we have to change the fight plan. And if we don't make the adjustments that are necessary doing this effort, then we're going to find ourselves falling up short. We have to change our fight plan. That what we're doing, like right now, when Madigan was House Speaker, and he's changed that we have a black House Speaker, and then we also have a black Democratic Party chairperson. We've got to write legislation, and we've got to be able to make sure that the legislation is impactful in changing and transforming our communities. And that goes not only local, but it has to be national. And what's happening, when I saw the video and talked about Orrin Hatch and all the rest of those, what I feel in demonic brothers who were involved in what happened to you guys out west, we have to call them what they are, and then we have to fight them like we need be. Because if we don't call them what they are, white supremacy has been the very core value of this country, and it needs to be addressed. It needs to be called out, and it needs to be constantly reminded of that. And sometimes as people of color, the tragedy is, and Danielle probably would agree with me, that we've been accomplices in our own crime, and we need to not be accomplices in our crime, but take control of our own destiny and a vision. And so, Toni, there's a frustration because we have been kind of behind the tail. We kind of been being wagged, and now we have to learn how to wag what's going on. And so it comes from writing legislation. It comes from organizing people. It comes from calling this is some of this stuff can't be tweaked. It can't be fixed by tweaking. It has to be overhauled completely. And if we don't understand that and be willing to put the time in and the work in, we've got problems.
Thank you, and I invite both Danielle and Angelo to comment on some of the things that you're thinking and actions that any one individual or a group, an organization can take.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that can be done in terms of just everyone's personal relationship to the land. Through an indigenous perspective, in my eyes, this country is only 500 years old. That's nothing. That's nothing. We've been here for thousands of years, and everybody just got here. Everybody. So to me, it's like the people are acting like toddlers. They're like children. They don't know what they're doing. They're knocking stuff over. They're making a mess. They're destroying everything. And it's kind of time for us to grow up. And the only way that we're going to make it through to the future is together. So in my perspective, from what I've been taught from our elders and our leaders, is that, we have to find a way to coexist and to do it peacefully, or we're not going to make it. And that's just been truer as time goes on, not only historically, but also just in this country, in these lands that was built on violence, slavery, and servitude. So what we have to do is radically think different and outside of the box, be innovative and creative, and also realize what our relationship is to this land. On top of that, you have to reconnect to the indigenous communities where you are. So if you think for a moment about the places and the people that live in your area, you can have a relationship with them, and most likely they're still there in some form or fashion. And I know in Chicago they're definitely still there. There's a large Native population there. So if you think of those places, even in Chicago, like the lands of the three fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi, as well as the Ho-Chunk, Menominee, and Miami, like it's important to know whose land you're on, whose land you're still on, because we're still here. We haven't gone anywhere. We're not died out. We're there. And we are the ultimate environmental ally because these are our lands. So it makes sense, the next evolution in the conservation scale for people to try to make change in the movement is to make meaningful, authentic, positive relationships to those indigenous communities and to other marginalized communities who call this place home.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Powerful, powerful, powerful actions that we can take. Danielle?
Just want to check that you can hear me.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. I just want to say, y'all better preach. And just to add to your point, Angelo, definitely a strong distinction needs to be made between tokenism and solidarity. That groups might be like, oh, well, here we go. We have made a connection with an indigenous group or a Black group, but what is the quality of that relationship? Are you just using them to check off a box that you're doing the work, or is it really a reciprocal relationship? So I just wanted to add that. So thank you for bringing that up. And also something I want to bring is just to kind of pay attention to different things that are happening. Like in Chicago, there's a lot of environmental justice issues going on, especially on the southeast side. And they might not seem like public land issues, but they do affect public lands. They affect the public, which is also connected to the land. For example, the General Iron facility is going to be put up possibly right across the street from an existing park, which is public land, right across from a high school, a public high school. So just like paying attention to what kind of action is happening, being in solidarity with hunger strikers and other people who are fighting is really important. Donating if you can to support them. And also thinking about the different ways. Sometimes I find that conservation traditionally can be separate from what we see as urban agriculture, but there's definitely a lot of synergy there. There's a lot of people, definitely like agriculture is often a very extractive industry, but here in Chicago, there's so many people who are growing food, who are stewards of the land and respect the land fully. And I do want to uplift Jackie Aben, because she is someone who has taught me a lot about my consciousness when it comes to this work. And I think that everyone should do some research on her. Jackie Abena Smith, she recently had an amazing interview that really highlights the themes that we're talking about. And she has taught so many other growers in Chicago. So supporting growers in Chicago, I think, especially people who are associated with the Urban Steward Action Network, is definitely a good way to support land sovereignty here.
Amen.
Thank you, Danielle. I just have a couple more questions for our panelists. Regarding the ALEC, since they are financed by industry, is there a good way for the public to get better transparency on which companies fund them so that we can take consumer and investor activism where applicable?
You got to help me on the. You have to help me on ALEC. What is the acronym?
They're talking about the American Legislative Exchange Council.
Yes, sorry.
From the film. Yeah, I mean, part of the problem there, I think, is you got overlap with private interests and with legislators, people writing laws and policies. So I think that's where people need to pay attention. and figure out what's going on in their own backyard, because that's how problems start. That's how guys crop up in Utah like Ken Ivory that want to do Transfer of Public Lands Act and, have the same old tired repertoire of property, liberty, and self-governance, which is actually it's sharing the same root of the kind of sort of domestic terrorism that is cropping up now, because it's inherently anti-federal and anti-Indian, and it's against public lands, national monuments, national parks, and so you have to think about what those authors and those legislators mean before they become a problem, because by the time you get to something that large, it's very hard to stop. So I think that's why we have to be cognizant, both politically, be savvy that way, but also organizationally, as my brother's been stating there, just make sure that we keep an eye on this stuff.
And you have in Illinois, we have like Representative Harper just put out an environmental justice bill. And like you said, doing the homework to make sure that these bills and legislation are really being impactful in our neighborhoods and community. When we talk about not only General Iron, which I appreciate Danielle raising it, but you've got the Gardens, which have had a historical problem. You've got Pilsen, which continues to deal with that coal plant that should have been removed a long time ago, and Waukegan, which also is dealing with coal, and then downstate, which we have all those dynamics. And so it's a multiplicity of things, but like you said, the legislation has to be all encompassing. But we still got people who want to keep old coal plants open. We've got the nuclear fallout from the plants that are closing there as well. So we've got on many fronts, but it's clearly we have to be productive and progressive legislation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One more question. We have a question from Lisa Willis in our audience who says, where is or are the most effective pockets in which to direct donations for preservation of public lands? Looking for organizations and groups with racially diverse boards and memberships, not outdo or undo. He was anti-Obama. I think she's referring to our last administration. But the question, what organizations and groups that really represent the truth of what we want to happen, where are they and how do we find out about them and how do we donate to them?
If I may, I'll fill out that rest of that comment. Because
Thanks.
I intentionally said outdo, because narcissism is not the same as racism. He wanted to undo Obama, but he had a narcissist streak in which he wanted to accomplish more and be known, acknowledged, be legitimized in the eyes of everybody else. So as somebody who's actually serving on the board of Conservation Lands Foundation, I'm one of the very few Native Americans that serve on a very large national conservation board. And we've been pushing that campaign of 30 by 30 very hard, just to make sure that we protect all these places. And we've been networking with Friends Grassroots Networks. So they're the ones that do stuff on the ground in their communities. And we've never had as many Native American or indigenous groups and communities that involved as we have now. Everyone from the Red Desert in Wyoming with the Cheyenne and Arapaho folks, to the Paiute folks out in Nevada with Gold Butte, and as far as up as Alaska, trying to protect their lands up there. So the work is in progress, and the leadership is starting to change. Things are starting to shift with the diversity, equity, and inclusion pieces. And so there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful. It's just a lot of work. So we're really looking forward to the next few years.
Sounds very optimistic, and we certainly could use a lot of optimism.
Your groups are not you don't need to be self-serving, but your group and Danielle's group are doing on the ground stuff, and that's critical. And I know you need support. I know you do, because that's where it happens. It happens both naturally and locally. And so y'all keep doing what you're doing, but y'all could use the support, and y'all don't need to speak for yourselves. I'll speak for you,
Yes, and to you as well, Pastor Vance. There's lots of organizations here locally, abroad. I would say do the homework to find out what organizations you're donating to, what their boards look like, what their political affiliations is. Don't just let something pop up on a screen and you put the money in it and it just goes and floats into the ether. Pay attention to these different fundraising campaigns around public land, and really make sure that you are donating and your dollars are going directly to grassroots organizations that are on the ground making things happen. So that would be my recommendation. Amy also says, from the audience, she's curious, what is the latest on the various legislation and challenges to the public lands that were mentioned in the film?
Well, I guess I should take this one too. Well, with the legislation and the challenges that are happening in public lands, as I mentioned, there's the 30 by 30 campaign. So by 2030, 30% of America's lands and waters to be protected is the kind of current campaign rollout. And so we're pushing very hard for that. Obviously, Secretary of the Interior nominee Deb Haaland is something to be excited about. First Native American to be appointed in that position for Interior, and we saw how complicated that nature is with both Zinke and Bernhardt, and then Penley. So all of that is really part of a larger story, a decades-long story in which we are trying to make sure that people are aware of the value of public lands and be able to give the appropriate input to their politicians, leaders, and of course their legislators, so that we can achieve that goal for everybody, for future generations.
Thank you so much, Angelo. I know we're leaning on you for your wisdom, but why wouldn't we? This is the very point we're trying to make, is that we need to have the right information from the right sources. So we're very pleased to have you here. I wanted to just invite the audience to kind of pop into the chat. What actions can you take? And while you're doing that, we'll go to the next slide, kind of summarizes some top actions submitted by our panelists as well as tonight's hosting sponsors, partners, and our team. So if you'll probably see a slide that kind of gives you some ideas, but we would love to invite you all to pop into the chat and tell us some actions that you believe that you can take. I see Lisa Willis says, start at home. Make the mental adjustment within to reorient your attitude toward the land where you live. See it, listen to it, adore it. Be the change you want to see. Find a group or start one. Use your voice, even if only your neighbor can hear it. Right on, Lisa Willis. Thank you. I also see Bonnie says, I lead a care for our common home ministry inspired by Pope Francis. Pope Francis at St. James Catholic Church in Arlington Heights. We formed a coalition called Interfaith Green Partners with Others. We write lawmakers, etc., and more. We are always seeking ideas. Thank you for that, Bonnie. So there's a lot of things that you can do out here to change. I see also I'm ready to make a change and inspire change, which is, of course, the theme, again, of this year's One Earth Film Festival. We will be definitely sharing with everyone these take action points, the recording of this discussion, and a transcript of the chat with the ideas and resources that have been shared here tonight. And I just want to turn for a moment to just thank our panelists. The work that you all are doing, I'm an emotional person. My throat is just closed because it's hard to get my emotions out for how powerfully grateful I am for the work that you all are doing to hold the truth of our land so that it does not get erased from memory. I am very, very grateful for Danielle Russell, very, very, very grateful for Pastor Booker Vance, and very, very grateful for Angelo Baca. I am just over the moon that you all are out there. I think all of us sleep a little bit better knowing that you all are out there doing the work to make sure that this planet gets handed down to future generations. So thank you for giving so generously of your time, wisdom, experiences, and stories and perspectives. We could certainly all use them. And as we close, I hope you felt a sense of One Earth's 10-year theme of inspiring change. I'm a big old One Earther film festival. I am about this festival. I believe that it is powerful conduit to allow us to get connected to issues that we can't necessarily fly to see. We can't live the experiences, but we can certainly use these films to inform us. So I'm really, really grateful for you all throughout the film and in the discussion and how we came together to build community around critical issues. If you would, we'd love for you to tell us now in the chat about ways you can stay connected and you can stay activated. I see CR Cooper says, talk to your people, call in your cousins and neighbors to make small and big changes to support those on the front lines. And Teresa says, you can start to make connections, first in community, then in city, then in region. Eventually your actions are rippling out. As Booker T. Washington said, cast down your bucket where you are. Different context, but same idea. Do what you can right where you are, and because there are problems everywhere, and you can make a change right there, right on. Thank you for that, Teresa. I would also say from my own planet, it is time for us to understand the history of our land. It is time for us to revisit the history of our lands, revisit the histories that we have been taught, and unlearn them and be willing to relearn them in new ways with more inclusive perspectives of the history that we have all been walking with. So with that, I wanted to just thank our panelists once again. I've read some responses that have inspired me. I hope that you all will continue to go out into the world and become inspired. Do your research to learn more about our panelists and stay in touch with their work. See the links on this next slide. Remember to tweet, post, and share about what you just experienced online and in social media. This is an amazing festival, and everyone should know that this festival is virtual and accessible, and you can watch from anywhere in the world. So make sure that you're spreading the word about the One Earth Film Festival on social media. If you found value in today's event, please donate to the One Earth Film Festival Fest and join us again this week, One Earth and Earth Week in April and throughout the year. The One Earth Film Festival is all this week. We have big Earth Day celebrations coming in April, and we're here all the time. And last but not least, a huge thanks to each and every one of you for being here and participating. Let's all give ourselves and our program participants one last round of applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you to the One Earth Film Festival team, to our panelists, to our audience, and all the stewards of the planet that are both in the ancestral realm and right here in the third dimension, helping us to hold and heal one another. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and stay tuned for the other good things that are happening at the One Earth Film Festival.